Welcome to Under the Gun. I'm Jon Friedberg, and thank you very much for tuning in to my 4th episode here of Under the Gun on Card Player TV. Have another great show for you guys today. My two guests are going to be Brandon Cantu and Justin Young, both very successful players on the tournament circuit. But first, I wanted to let you guys know I'm adding a new segment to the show that's going to be very fun. It's going to be called Forum Photo Shopaments. So we'll be getting to that in a minute. Also, I'll be talking about my Under the Gun challenge later in the show. My goal to win $100,000 playing 1-2 and 2-4 no limit cash games on UB. And also, of course, my challenge to win a World Series main event seat, also playing on UB. But first, I want to talk about something that is widely discussed in poker. It's something a lot of people are curious about. And on the tournament circuit, it's something that a lot of the players have a lot of experience with. And that is backing and the whole concept of being staked to play in poker tournaments. I get a lot of emails and a lot of people ask me, how does it work? So I guess the most simple way to explain how it works is a third party or a group of people will put up money for somebody to play in a tournament. Well, generally a group of tournaments, not just one tournament, because there's different percentage or different sharing and whatnot, depending on the number of tournaments. But assuming that the player is going to play in a lot of tournaments, like let's say the World Series, then the backer or the backers will put up the buy-ins, the player will play in the tournaments, and then any profits will be split 50-50. So with the World Series right around the corner, what I plan on doing tonight, in fact, is writing a letter to some people that have invested in me in poker tournaments before, and luckily have had some success doing that. I'll be writing a letter basically saying I'm looking to play in, I'm not quite sure what my schedule is yet, but let's say I want to play in $100,000 at tournaments, so I'll be looking to either raise $50,000 in exchange for 25% of my action, or the full $100,000 for 50% of my action. It's a pretty simple concept. Generally, the proven players tend to keep about 50 or split 50-50. Some players have better deals, some players have not as favorable deals, but generally that's how it works. Before we move into my Under the Gun challenge, let's check out the new segment called Forum Photo Shopaments. It's a little bit of a tongue twister, but if anybody pays any attention to the poker forums, there is a lot of comedy that goes on in there, and one thing that I personally like to do, and I know a lot of other people do also, is browse through the forums and look at some of the mock-ups that these very clever and very creative forum posters have put in there about other poker players generally. The first topic that I want to show you guys are some pictures that I've taken out myself from a thread called Most Baller Setups as You Envision Them. And basically what people have done is created some images of what the computer setups look like at home of some of the more well-known players. And that said, let's have a look at some of these baller setups. They're pretty funny. The first image here was put up by Gobi Lux, and this is Dennis Phillips' setup at home. I think he probably works and plays on a big 18-wheeler rig. Next, we have Phil Hellmuth's home setup, where obviously the keyboard smashed right through the monitor. That's nothing that any of us would ever expect to see anything otherwise at Phil Hellmuth's place. That was by Clovis 8. Kingfish created a few images here. One is Doyle Brunson's very modernized PC that he plays on Doyle's room at. This thing is straight out of like 1960s. Then of course we have Phil Ivey's machine here with one button and one button only. That's all he really needs. We all know that Jerry Buss owns the Los Angeles Lakers, so Kai1 created what Jerry Buss's setup looks like, and it appears that he plays online right in the middle of the Staples Center. Pretty impressive that he can do that. Now, we all know about Annette 15 having won a tournament without even looking at the card. She used I think a Post-it note to cover her hand for pretty much every hand but one, as I recall. So obviously this is Annette's laptop at home with Post-it notes all over the screen, and that was posted by AC345. He also posted one of Greg Raymer's setup, which conveniently is located at the McDonald's drive-thru. He just pulls right up, and there is his PokerStars table waiting for him at the McDonald's drive-thru. I thought that one was pretty funny. Here's another one of Phil Ivey's computers at home by PB Jacks, where it's basically an ATM machine because, again, Phil Ivey has either one button or just an ATM that prints money for him. Jennifer Tilley's setup here, which was created by Kingfish. Obviously, constant reminders of pocket kings all over the place. We all remember when she was on, I think it was Poker After Dark, when she checked jacks full, fearing that somebody may have had pocket kings, I think. And the last setup we have by Mr. K. Dilkington, the one and only Sam Grizzle. This is Sam's setup. You can see him leaning back and just chilling out, playing online. I'm sure he's having a great Sunday here. Good stuff. So thank you guys for the great work in the forums. I love reading through those, and so do a lot of other people. And like I said, that will be a new feature here on Under the Gun, forum photoshopaments. So keep up the great work, and I will keep featuring them right here on Under the Gun. And now for my Under the Gun challenge. Not a great week for the Under the Gun challenge, I'm sorry to say. I had a wonderful week last week. I think I won maybe 1,500 or so. This week, quite the opposite. In fact, I played 10,000 hands of 1-2 no limit on UB, and my net result was losing $1,500. So as you can see here, my chart for the week, pretty much straight down, ran really bad, and that puts me for the month up about $360. So you can see I had a huge spike in the early part of the month, I should say the first week through, and basically most of those profits have been erased. That said, I'm playing great. Just had a lot of unfortunate beats, the worst of which was flopping a set of 8s versus a set of 3s, only for a 3-ball to hit the turn, and unfortunately we were both about 200 BBs deep, so that was a giant pot. And those need to stop happening. Didn't really take too many shots at winning a World Series main event seat on UB this week. I did play in a couple of step tournaments, but again, I really have been focusing on winning $100,000 in 12 months. I've been putting a lot more time into the cash game part of the challenge and really haven't focused too much on the World Series yet because we still have probably 6 weeks, and I don't expect it'll take me too long once I really start trying to win a seat on UB, but I am looking forward to that. Let's get to the panel. Let me get Mr. Brandon Cantu and Justin Young on the show. A little bit of background on these guys. I'm sure you all know Brandon Cantu. He's won almost $4 million on the tournament circuit, a couple World Series bracelets, a WPT event, a win. I could go on and on. Basically, he's won almost everything, and he's got a lot of TV time, so I'm sure you guys all know Brandon Cantu for his crazy, crazy style, which I'm going to ask him about. And my other guest, like I said, is Justin Young. I think the best way to describe Justin is like a silent threat. A lot of people don't really know who he is because he hasn't had as much exposure as some of the main players on the circuit, but he's certainly had the results. He's won about $2.5 million on the tournament circuit. He's had a few major event final tables. I don't believe he's booked a win yet in a major event, but he has won, obviously, lots of other tournaments that maybe weren't televised and whatnot. He is a former engineer turned poker pro. And with that said, let's get these guys on and hear what they have to say. So Brandon, Justin, thank you guys for coming on the show. Appreciate it. Yesterday was possibly one of the biggest Sundays online of all time. We had the Mini F-Tops main event. We had the Scoop main events. And, of course, all the other tournaments. How'd you guys do? Did you play yesterday?
Go ahead.
Unfortunately, I did. I actually started, I printed out like all the tournaments I was going to play, and the 10K main event was not on there. But I busted all of the early tournaments like pretty quickly, so my slate was pretty dry, so I decided to top in there. And still didn't do anything. I final tabled like one of the rebuys, and that got me cut like my losses in half. So that's about it.
Nice.
And I pretty much did nothing yesterday except for in one of the UB 500s that had 100 people in it. I took 7th and I paid 6 places. That was really, really disappointing. It had a $2,500 bubble for a $500 tournament, which is more than you usually will see.
Yes.
Of course, I ended up playing way too big of a hand with ace-king versus 8s, where I flopped the ace and he turns the 8.
Oh.
which crushed my hopes.
When did the money go in? Probably the turn?
Pre-flop. Pre-flop, you know. I was,
So you got teased and then
yeah, I got teased with the ace on the flop, and
that's terrible.
That sucks. Anyway, so there's a big news story this week that maybe you guys have heard of, maybe you haven't. Michael Mizrachi, and I guess it was the Sun Sentinel released an article that he's in pretty bad financial problems. I guess he's foreclosing or foreclosed on his 2 houses, and he owes over $350,000 in taxes from his winnings. Now, he's one example, and it's tough to say how much of that is his own irresponsibility and how much of it was, due to the economy with his foreclosures and whatnot. But he's one example. Do you think a lot of other poker players are in the same shape? And do you consider yourselves more responsible than that, or?
Myself personally, yes, just because the first 2 years I decided to just play poker for a living. I was actually audited, not through any fault of my own, just my books were a little messy, is all. But after it was all cleared up, I didn't owe any more money or anything like that. But since then, I keep daily logs, and everything's just so. So I don't have to worry about it at all anymore.
Now, you have a background as, I think you said you were an engineer, is that right? So generally, is it safe to say you had a pretty normal career before coming into poker, and therefore you might be more organized than some other players?
I guess it's a certain kind of personality, but I take my time and think think steps very, very slowly. I was a hydraulics engineer for the government for 3 years, and the whole time I wanted to quit to play poker for a living. I had the money, but I made a list of 30 things I had to accomplish in my career or financially in order for myself to to allow myself to quit a very nice job, to go out and gamble for a living. So, I'm very meticulous when it comes to that kind of stuff anyway.
in poker it can be really easy to let yourself go. If you hit a big score, if you hit a 6-figure score, just to kind of forget about paying your taxes, and then you try to wait maybe till the end of the year, and that can be a bad recipe for certain players. And then at the end of the year, they've spent so much money on partying and doing whatever that they don't have their money. And so I really try to take it into my own hands to, every time I hit a score, actually send money in and make sure I get my quarterlies in, which I'm one of the only few people that I know that does it as a poker player. I feel I'm pretty responsible with it.
Now, was that learning from your mistakes, or were you just have you always been kind of, forward thinking like that?
I've always been real concerned with my taxes, actually, because government scares me.
Well, what do you guys think about other players? I mean, you're always hearing stories about guys being broke, and earlier in my intro I talked about staking and a little bit about how that works. Do you think a lot of poker players are responsible like you guys, and also like myself, or do you think that the three of us tend to stand out a little bit as anomalies in this industry?
I think we completely stand out. I mean, I think a lot of people are trying to really fly under the radar, especially that aren't in the spotlight. I think very few players are really doing their taxes well.
I agree, and even the ones that have the best intentions, like you said, they hit a big score, but they don't pay the taxes right away. They always have vices, whether it's pits or drinking or drugs or whatever it is. So like you said, at the end of the year, when it's time to pay your taxes, even if they want to, they don't really have the choice. So then they get in the habit of, okay, well, how do I get away from paying my taxes? And they see how easy it was for 1 year, and they just let it roll over and over and over.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I think it's not to single out poker players, because I don't mean by any way to say that these are poker players specifically, but I think generally speaking, when you have people that were brought up without certain financial responsibilities or certain organizational skills in their lives, and then they come into a lot of money, they really just don't really know how to handle it, and a lot of times they, like most people in America, when they do come into money, whether it's, you hear about these people who either won on Survivor and, owe whatever in taxes, or they win the lottery, or these, musicians that find, success with a record label or whatever, and then suddenly they have to surrender all their houses and cars and everything. So really it's not poker players per se. I think it's just people that aren't taught how to handle money, and then they come into money. But you say that it's funny you mentioned vices, because there's a lot of actually one of my segments before this panel, I did the forum Photoshop mints where we talk about, or I showed some pictures of people's setups at home that sort of imply what their lifestyles are. And, a lot of players are well known as having these vices that take all their poker winnings away, despite the fact that they might be great poker players. And I think one person that stands out of every conversation is probably TJ Cloutier. Anybody who's played poker at any venue where TJ has played has most likely seen him playing craps. And a lot of people talk about or joke about his issue with craps, where he's like, I mean, even during the World Series, if you walk through the Rio any time of the day, unless it's early in the tournament, TJ is there playing craps. It's pretty amazing. Have you guys seen him?
Yeah. The very first time I actually played craps in my lifetime was with TJ Cloutier.
I think that's a real special story.
A lot of people can say that.
Yeah, that's true. I was like, I don't feel unique about it or anything, but I did make him some money on my roll. That's all I know for sure. Wasn't sure what I was doing.
So, again, you guys are more responsible, so maybe you're not going to have, a mixed viewpoint on this. But does a broke player make them a bad player?
I think it can make you a bad player. It can make you play worse being broke. It can also make you play a lot better too. I know a lot of people that when they don't play good until they're broke.
Yeah, I mean, playing desperate is different from playing good. If you play desperate, then you're not going to play your best. You're going to tighten up. You're going to, worry about the money bubble a lot more. But at the same time, I think it can make you more patient. Like, there's the other side of the coin makes you more patient. Like, you can maybe concentrate and focus a little bit harder because, like, there's not a tournament tomorrow. Like, if you're broke, like, this is your tournament. So you think through things a lot more. So it can work either way, I think. But I wouldn't classify it one way or the other. But I don't know. I certainly don't want to get in that boat. So I don't know.
Now, what do you guys think about playing on your own bankroll versus playing on using backers to enter tournaments?
I can speak pretty good because I've been on both sides of that. I used to think, and when I first started, I only played for myself, and I loved it. And then I kind of thought, well, the tournaments can take a really big hit, and I kind of hit a really bad streak, and so I started getting backed. And then I absolutely loved it. I was like, I'll never do anything but be backed again. I just love being backed. And then I stopped being backed, and I started playing on my own.
Was that your own choice?
Yeah, it was my own choice. And I started playing on my own, and now I think that, I'll only play on my own again. I love playing on my own and not splitting money, but it takes a lot, it takes a big bankroll to be able to hold. And it makes me think twice on any buy-in that's $15K and higher. I think, do I want to do it? And maybe, I'll go find a friend and sell a piece off or so. But on other, it makes me think twice. I don't want to just run into, 10 or 15 10Ks and just bust out, or go through the whole World Series and absolutely strike out. That'd be, bad on my bankroll. But I think once you start winning a little bit, and at least for me, I've had a good year, so it'll be all right for a while.
A good year? Good 3 years, you mean?
Well, yeah, good 3 years.
Yeah, this is a guy at the table, he's won a bracelet, he's won a WPT event, and he's like, oh, when's it going to be my turn? Like, we're playing the WPT championship, and, we both have chips. And he's like, oh, when's it going to be my turn? And I'm like, it's been your turn for 3 years.
I don't know. Nobody complains about running worse than Brandon does, but
it just seemed like it was my turn again.
He just likes to always have his turn. Maybe is what it comes down to.
See, people don't understand that it's these small fields, so it's got to be your turn a lot in a 25K field, and there's not 200 people. It's got to be your turn all the time, or it's not going to be going well. People forget that your turn has to be all the time.
Oh, I agree.
Speaking of your turn, and speaking of 25K events, Justin, didn't you finish second in the 25K event?
No, I was
a couple years ago.
8th 2 years ago. And
8th?
Yeah, I got second in a different WPT event, but
Got it.
It's never been my turn.
Oh. Well, I think I had my turn once, but just like all poker players feel like we constantly run worse than we should, I think we always feel like it should be our turn. What about you, Justin? Do you play with backers or do you play on your own money?
I play on my own right now, and like he was saying, it's tough. Like when you have a bunch of WPTs or a bunch of 10Ks, 15Ks, they really take a hit out of the bankroll. So I just set rules for myself, like only X percent of my bankroll can go towards a tournament. As long as you stick to that and you're okay with backing down and just playing 2K tournaments or 1K tournaments, then it'll work out. And if it's ever close or questionable, like I do sell pieces myself every once in a while, and like even more importantly, I swap percents with like a bunch of my friends, so it helps kill the variance a little bit. You know, sometimes I pay out, but like, you know, if you swap out 15-20%, then you're still getting some rake back every once in a while, and it keeps you in the game a little bit easier.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And I've sort of never been fully backed and never been fully on my own. I tend to just sell pieces of myself, which I talked about earlier. If with like $100,000 of events coming up in the World Series, I'll probably sell 50,000, you know, half of my buy-ins for a quarter of my action or something like that. So I kind of take the hybrid approach, and I'm pretty happy with that. But I personally wouldn't want to be like a slave to a backer. I hear a lot of stories about how these guys are just, you know, you have to get permission to play an event certain, you know, 3 weeks before, or else if you ask them a week before, that, you know, they say no because you didn't tell them soon enough. There's too much like red tape and politics and BS, I think, when you're dealing with some of these backers. But at the same time, you know, it takes a great stomach to handle some of the swings when you're playing on your own. So
there's always a headache involved in getting backed. One of my good friends, he's 100% backed right now, and we're kind of trying to talk him out of it, to try and just cut ties with him, because like the same stuff. He doesn't have to ask him 3 weeks in advance, but like it's such a pain for him to have to call, and then the guy has all these rules and stipulations. He's like, okay, was the prize pool going to be over this? How many people pay? What's first place going to be? And like, you know, he has to like late register for like all these events, because like he has to find out all this information before he's allowed to like buy in, and that's such a headache. I don't think I'd want to go through like any of that.
Makes sense as from an investor standpoint if you're the backer, but
course.
it's a real pain in the ass if you're a player.
Yeah.
Right.
I really like the approach of selling pieces off. Now that, you know, just on the really big buy-ins, I'm a real fan of that. I used to be, and I really used to like the whole backing situation. But now on the really big buy-ins, just finding someone to, I guess, but I'm probably luckier than most to be able to find a contact easy. But I really like that approach.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for your insight, guys. Appreciate you coming on the show.
Mm-hmm.
Been great. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Under the Gun. Brandon and Justin provided some great insight, I think. I thought they were great guests, and look forward to having them on the show at a future date. And remember to follow me on Twitter for your chance to win a free poker lesson from me. My Twitter address is @Jon Friedberg. And also, if you don't have an account on UB, make sure you sign up for one. You can check out my website for details on that, www.jonfriedberg.com. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys next week.